this is closer to home. And this is very meaningful. Like you've heard for years, the Trek of the Seven Sisters. When I was in high school at St. Mary's Academy, we had a play and we did the Trek of the Seven Sisters and I was in it. So from high school, I knew about this and I read about it, but it's not like doing it.
Sister Mary Murphy, every year she takes people on a trek, and I just said, I wonder if she would take me.
I'll get these out before we get settled. Okay. You need the diary.
All right, and then these
Tracy,
folders.
you have a diary? Take out 5 right now. Anybody not have a diary?
We begin this journey and we begin it in gratitude and thanksgiving to be able to honor our sisters of so long ago.
In 1868, Bishop Lamy of Santa Fe wrote to Mother Superior in St. Louis asking for sisters for 2 missions in the West. He wanted the sisters to open an academy, a school, as there was no school in the territory of Arizona.
Please be so kind as to inform me if we can really rely on your community for a colony of sisters for Tucson. There is a great deal of good to be done there, and you have many sisters.
In the diary that Sister Monica kept, one of the parts that really grabbed me was the fact that these 7 women realized that when they left, they were leaving, never to return, a total unknown. And that has always struck me, that took a great deal of faith, courage, and perseverance.
The sisters, they went the Mexico side on the first part of that trek, going to Tucson.
Yeah.
So we know they went because it was more flat this way, right?
Well,
and then to go around.
They had to cross the Tijuana River, where it was flat, and then they went up that mesa.
Are we doing the prayer first?
Yes.
We have some readings from the diary and some explanations, commentary.
Wednesday, April 27th, 1870, train arrival in San Francisco from St. Louis. At 7:00 p.m., we reach San Francisco. We were received most cordially by the good Sisters of Mercy, who did all in their power to make us comfortable.
The Mercy Sisters took them by carriage to a boat named the Orizaba, which went back and forth between San Francisco and San Diego. The Orizaba was really quite a famous ship. I was trying to find something more interesting to do about the trek, and I looked up the Orizaba on the computer and located the house that was built from the remains of the ship by Captain Johnson's daughter. When we drove up to see that house 2 or 3 years ago, one of the sisters, Sister Irma Adabashan, who was bold and brave, rang the doorbell. A man came to the door and he said, "Yes, this is the Orizaba house. Come in." The beams on the ceiling are original. The staircase is original, and a picture of the Orizaba is over the fireplace.
Beautiful, thank you.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you so much.
Here, I'm okay.
Here we go with
With who? I am. Here we go.
They had no idea that next part of the journey was going to be perilous. So far, I mean, the train ride wasn't perilous. The ship from San Francisco to San Diego.
They had no true understanding of what lay ahead of them, crossing the mountains and then crossing the desert. The bishop said, "I will get back to you on how to get there. I have to consult with people." He had no clue how to get to Tucson. And the smart way would have been to stop in Los Angeles, and it would have been difficult, but it would not have been horrific, because crossing those mountains was horrific. And nobody told them to go to Los Angeles. They took this boat to San Diego.
They hired a horse and carriage. They set out in procession holding what we would call a yucca. They called it a St. Joseph lily, and they sang as they walked along.
You can pull out your diary to page 12.
Saturday, May 7th, 1870, leaving San Diego. The carriage was too small for all of us to ride inside.
There were like 2 benches inside for 3 people to sit on one side on a bench and 3 people facing on the other side. So that's room for 6. And there were 7 sisters, so one rode in front with the driver. And Sister Ambrosia volunteered to do that. You are sitting on wooden benches that are resting on iron wheels that are nailed to wooden spikes. You're going over dirt roads that are filled with rocks. A reporter from one of the newspapers said to ride it was like a journey to hell.
Consequently, one was obligated to ride outside with the driver. Sister Ambrosia volunteered to make the great act of mortification and humility. It is beyond description what she suffered in riding 200 miles in a country like this without protection from the rays of a tropical sun.
We camped about sunset at the foot of a mountain, made some tea, and took our supper off a rock. All were cheerful. We wished Reverend Mother could see us at supper.
Right, you see that brick building? Or that stone building? That's it.
The sisters followed the wagon trail to a place that is now called Campo. And that was like a ranch house where men gathered, where mail was distributed, and where they could secure a good meal.
We're following that trail. So this is a really significant place for us.
On this road, our sisters came through back in 1870.
And they were offered a lovely lunch. And then after the lunch, a number of the men came out and proposed to them. Why would they ever go on to Tucson? Because they would be massacred by the Indians. These men had a lovely place there. Their houses were there, but they didn't have women. They should stay there and marry these men.
Are there any bachelors back there?
A whole bunch of them, 4 of them.
Come on, girls.
Wow, that is incredible. That's amazing.
And to think Mary, if you can climb this rock here, this is the rock that they slept on.
When they left Campo, they're along what we would call today Highway 94. And that evening, they came across a stretch of rocks, large enough to sleep on.
Okay, are you ready? We're gonna sleep.
We're sleeping on the rock?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, oh Celia, look at you. I can do that.
Yeah. There. Can you feel their DNA, Pat?
Yeah, I can feel their
Just coming
DNA.
right up.
And I'm thinking the whole time, they didn't have a cell phone on the rock with them.
No. Oh.
Shall we go on the way?
Isn't that?
This is the Utah Desert, the northern Colorado Sonora Desert. And that's what you see out there that goes all the way to Tucson. So you think that these 7 nuns in 1870 went to that one?
Almost undoubtedly they went down that to the base of that valley. See that? That's the old wagon road.
Okay.
Mountain Springs. There is it actually splits in that valley. See where that line goes back into the valley there? They headed east from it?
Yeah, to Tucson.
Wow.
And 7 of them
Yes.
with the driver in a cart in May, and they all survived.
Oh, yeah.
And
I
with
mean,
minimum provisions and stopping wherever there was water.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we're trying to emulate the originals.
Oh, okay. Good luck.
Climbing Mountains, Crossing Deserts. A reading from the diary of Sister Monica Corrigan. Monday, May 9th, 1870. Abomination of desolation. We spent the day climbing up and down hills. We were obliged to travel it on foot. Some of the sisters lay down on the roadside, being unable to proceed farther. Besides this terrible fatigue, we suffered still more from thirst.
The heat is extreme. In one place, we passed a drove of horned cattle said to contain 1,000 head. Every one died of the heat the same day.
We joined hands 2 by 2 and ran as well as we could. It was certainly a novel sight to see the sisters alone.
They called this the Abomination of desolation. That was their description of all these rocks. They had their habits on, so they had long skirts. And when we were in the habit, we used to pull the skirts up and tuck them in our waist belt. And I'm sure that they must have done that so they didn't trip. Their shoes were very thin, so I can feel the rocks biting through the soles of the shoes. Yeah. When you look at the rocks, I see the impossibility of what they did. I mean, it was incredibly brave and courageous that they would face this. They didn't have this in France. They didn't have this in St. Louis. And here it is before them. And to figure out, okay, let's run down the hill, because the wagon couldn't hold them. It would have added too much weight and it would have gone too fast. So they all had to run. And then it said in the prayer service, they got to the bottom, they just collapsed because their legs were so tired and they had to catch their breath. I can just picture myself running down, holding hands and thinking, oh my God, when will we get to the bottom? And they made it. They made it.
At midnight, we reached a ranch. We would not have refused some refreshments, but there was none. We lay down in the corner of the stable and rested until 4:00 a.m.
It was
Indeed, a beautiful sight to see the sisters at the lonely hour of midnight, crossing the frightful desert, singing hymns.
Amen.
That environment is very, very hostile.
They had to start traveling by night because it was too hot to travel by day.
Have you ever seen anything more desolate? And the temperature probably was hitting 100, 105 degrees.
They also had times when they had nothing but tea for the entire day.
Right.
So they crossed that desert almost starving.
The fact that they were able to do this is just absolutely incredible.
It's the only existing station here in California of the Butterfield stations that were every 20 miles or so. The sisters would have stopped here. We want to go left up here. We go up to where this ends and we cross over the bridge.
This river, Colorado River, has a very kind of perilous route to come down to Yuma.
And this is where the sister almost tipped over,
Yeah,
the raft almost tipped over.
And remember, it's the horse who trips over, who falls, who stumbles, who actually saves the sisters from peril. Mary, if you would like to lead us in that, please.
For 7 o'clock, we left Lower California and entered Arizona. We crossed the Colorado River about
9 o'clock on what they term here a towboat, which, however, is nothing but a raft. We were obliged to go over in the carriage, as they did not wish to cross over a second time. As the horses sprang forward, the raft floated back. One of the horses fell on the raft, which is the only thing that saved us from a watery grave. The weight of the horse prevented the carriage from rolling into the river. We merely escaped being drowned in ending our mission before reaching Arizona.
It's great.
Well, I learned something today.
Tell us.
You know, you have to pay really close attention when you go on this, because I forgot, and this is my second time around, and I'm seeing different things and more things, and it's having a different impact on
I
me.
think it touches something about the perseverance of people and the resiliency of the human spirit to be able to make this trek.
It's because we like these stories. They're archetypal stories. They're stories of going off in a quest and facing adversity and coming out the other end as a different, better person.
You know, when you're a young adult or a young student, especially if you're at the Mount, you know, there is this desire to serve. You know, there's that search of what am I supposed to do with my life, but a lot of our students are very service-minded, or at least have this idea that they could be of service, but what that means or what it looks like is very vague, you know, at this point. But I want them to feel like they are a part of a trajectory of history, of a tradition, that they have women who went before them, who made courageous decisions together as friends, so that they don't feel like it's this foreign thing that's out there that they'd have to do on their own. They're just doing what women have always done, especially in the CSJ, you know, tradition.
This pass is where the Apaches would hide, and people coming through, they would shoot their arrows.
From Monica's diary, we were then approaching Picacho Peak, where the Apaches are accustomed to attack travelers. A fearful massacre had been perpetrated there only a week previous. So as I read up on my notes on the Apaches, from 1853 to 1889, there was constant unrest in that whole area, because with the settlers, 49ers and others coming west, the Apaches' way of life was threatened.
But when the soldiers accompanied people with rifles, the Indians were hesitant to do anything. They passed through unscathed.
The diary of the trek is a journey, and it's a journey from being comfortable, moving out into the margins and moving out to your uncomfortable area. But that happens in each of our lives, that eventually you're going to have to get out of your comfort zone. If you really are driven, mission driven, you really have to get out of your comfort zone area in order to really have that neighbor become dear. I admire their fearlessness. They must have been at times thought, good God, what did I do, you know?
Exactly.
Which that happened to me in Peru too. I thought, what in the world am I doing here? Well, there was only 2 times that I could think of in my life that I really felt threatened and endangered in Peru, when Sendero Luminoso came into our house, and they were trying to get us to commit. Either we were on their side or on well, what they considered the government side. And but that guy kept playing with that trigger on the rifle he had.
Teresa's story reminds me of the police in Mexico when I thought I was going to be arrested, and we were in a little town in the Gulf Coast called Coatzacoalcos, and we got on the bus. I remember I cried and cried and cried because I had been so scared, and that's really the only time I can really remember being so scared. But it was all the sisters who came to my support, but we were so happy to get out of there.
We were going from Mo to Arequipa, and the bus driver got up and said that there are robbers on the highway. And all of a sudden, there were gunshots. You hear them, but you don't know where they're coming from. And we had this young woman with us, and we both got over her to protect her. And you never know what the next second or minute will bring. I felt like these sisters, mentioned their solidarity with each other, and we don't hear about complaining, or there was fear acknowledged, but not in the sense of giving up or fleeing. They were present to the moment.
The sisters on the trek. This is the first hospital, and chronologically, the pictures go every 7 to 10 years.
You know, when they arrived in Tucson, that the entire town of 3,000 people greeted them. It's always brought tears to my eyes. Where else in history have you heard of an entire town coming to greet Seven Sisters? That is a spectacular kind of a thing.
And in today's Tucson, everybody knows about the Seven Sisters, because when they arrived, they established schools, they established orphanages, a hospital, and then a second hospital.
There are some original things in this chapel, the chapel that was used by most of the sisters when there were large numbers of sisters here in town in the 40s and 50s.
This is where they arrived in 1870.
When the Seven Sisters arrived in Tucson, one of the first things they did was found an academy for girls. So this is in 1870, and there was another separate academy for little boys. But the first academy, St. Joseph's Academy, was the first high school in Tucson, in Arizona. First high school in Arizona, founded by the sisters, and it lasted 15 years, 1870 to 1885, and it was adjacent to the cathedral, and this is the site of the first cathedral here in Tucson. And then in 1885, there was a second site that was founded, and that's where we're going to next.
Okay, some pictures of the academy back when. Okay, 1885, they moved in. Academy and provincially and division.
This is where our sisters first came to live in San Javier to work in the school.
We were obliged to fix up an old room in the monastery which had not been used for 100 years or more. The first thing Mother did was get several pans of sulfur and kept it burning in this room for several days and nights to oust the centipedes, scorpions, tarantulas, which had nested for years and years.
Oh, this is the chapel. This was the chapel. This was the original chapel. They don't use it as a chapel anymore. It's a hall. But the original beams and everything.
We come here to commemorate those seven sisters who came first to Arizona and 5 that are buried here.
Sisters Monica Corrigan, Euphrasia Suchet, Emerencia Bonifoy, Hyacinth Blanc, Ambrosia Arnashad, Martha Peters, and Maxime Croissat.
We inherited the charism that those seven sisters brought. Now, there's the general charism of the Sisters of St. Joseph, but those seven brought to us in the West to a certain extra spirit that's part of this charism. And in many ways, we own it, that people get caught in the charism and get a loving experience of being with the community.
Route 1017.